Hey guys, Grant Clayton here, founder and CEO of 1% List. Today is an interesting day to say the least. Woke up this morning having breakfast with a family, and I saw the message that NAR has agreed to settle the lawsuits, or at least NAR has proposed a settlement for all the lawsuits for $418 million, which is one thing. But really, the big thing is NAR is agreeing to basically remove a buyer's agent's commission from the MLS entirely. So there will no longer be a commission offered in the MLS. So what does that mean? Um, First, a disclaimer. All of this is just my opinion. I am not an attorney, but I've been following the cases very closely. My company, 1% Lists, we're kind of different. We're the rebels of the real estate industry, so to speak. So if you want a differing opinion than the one you might have heard, this is a good place to get it. I think it's important to consider outside opinions for whatever it's worth. There's a lot of agents that I've talked to that I very much respect that they say, oh, well, my broker tells me this is all going to blow over. It's not going to be a big deal. And real estate coaches are saying the same. I'm hearing that from a lot of people. Well, it is a big deal and it's not going away, and things are going to change. And being ahead of that curve is important for everybody, having a little bit of foresight to see what's coming. So NAR made the offer to settle $418 million. Part of that is, hey, we're no longer going to require buyer agents commission in the MLS. I don't even think it's going to be an option. The DOJ is really who's been pushing for a lot of that. The Department of Justice has been pushing for what they're calling a decoupling of commissions. And the reason they're saying that's important is steering. So basically, as long as a buyer's agent can go into the MLS and see what a house is paying them, there is a tendency to want to steer their clients to the higher paying homes. So if they're going to see 5 houses and 4 of them are paying 3% commission to the buyer's agent and one of them is paying 1.5%, there's a tendency to say, oh, well, this house is under contract already, or oh, this house had termites, this house had a slab problem, this house, you don't want this house, this house is in a bad area. All these things. Look, I know a lot of agents are going to respond and say, I've never done this. And I'm not saying you have. What I'm saying is there's a lot of agents on record that have. Okay. They've got phone calls. They've got literal messages from agents saying, I'm not going to show this house unless you pay me this. Okay. Or I'm refusing to show houses that don't pay this. In fact, in at least one MLS that I know of, it was made possible to sort listings by the amount that they were paid in the MLS and only send the ones to your client that pay you a certain amount. That was a thing. And that's why the Department of Justice got involved. So the point of the Department of Justice is as long as the seller is responsible for offering upfront a payment to the buyer's agent, then there is going to effectively be a requirement that that fee be a certain amount. Otherwise, agents won't show it. So as long as it is expected for a seller to pay a buyer's agent, that seller is going to be compelled to pay a buyer's agent a higher fee, because if they don't, it will hurt the activity of their home. It's just a fact. And I agree with it. I agree that by and large, that's true. I mean, why do you think D.R. Horton sends all these agents text messages all the time saying, hey, come buy a house with us. We're going to pay you 3%. If you sell 3 houses, we're going to pay you 5%. Why do they do that? To make the agents push their homes. It's just reality. It is just reality. So what's the future of the MLS? I don't know that anybody knows. I mean, the big reason for the MLS is clear cooperation. If you're a member of this MLS, then we're guaranteeing as cooperating brokerages that you're going to get paid as long as you're a member of this MLS and you're selling a house on this MLS. Well, if there's no longer any commissions being offered in the MLS up front, what happens to the MLS? I don't know. The MLS is still very necessary. They do great things. We as agents need a place to search for homes and do market analysis for homes that we're trying to list and everything else. But if it's no longer going to be allowed that a seller pay a buyer's agent, what is the point of belonging to an MLS? Or maybe not what's the point, but it definitely devalues the MLS, because that was really the big point. If you belong to this MLS and you sell a house listed in this MLS by a broker belonging to this MLS, we are guaranteeing you're going to get paid. That's the MLS. So if that's gone, I don't know what happens. What does this mean for buyer's agents? Well, I think we can look at history and we can look at the stock market. Once again, unfortunately, with these issues, it's just like the news. You know, if you want to believe this, then you watch this news station, and if you want to believe that, you watch that news station. I think the stock market is pretty unpolitical when it comes to these things. On October 31st, when the Missouri court case came down and that verdict came down, Zillow stock traded about 400% more than normal, and it was down 10%. As of the time that I kind of put my notes together for this, Zillow was down 11%, but now I'm clicking over and now Zillow is down 12%. So why would Zillow be down? Well, the primary driver for revenue for Zillow is selling buyer agent leads. And so if you're an agent and you're watching this and you're no longer going to be guaranteed a compensation for a buyer agent, for a buyer, what are you willing to pay for a buyer lead? I mean, I can tell you this, if every buyer paid me 8% to represent them, I'd value a buyer lead pretty high. But if I had to pay a fee for a buyer, I didn't know if that buyer is going to pay me anything. I don't know how much I would value that buyer lead, you know? And so that's what the stock market is saying really right now. And it's pretty simple. If there's no longer guaranteed compensation for working with a buyer, then what is a buyer worth? And it's a very serious question. And if you're an agent that mainly deals with buyers, or if you are a Zillow Premier agent, or if you're a Zillow Flex agent, you're watching this. I mean, I'm not saying abandon all hope, and I'm not saying abandon ship, but what I am saying is in a future where you might not be guaranteed any payment for working with a buyer, and you have to negotiate that, and you might meet with one buyer who says, oh yeah, no, I agree. I need you. You're desperately needed. You know, I'm living all the way across the country. I need you to represent me fully and completely. I think 3% is reasonable. You know, I need you to preview homes. I need you to FaceTime me from homes. I need you to do all this research. But for somebody who's looking at buying a house down the street, they say, hey, you know, I'll pay you 1%, or I'll pay you 0.5%, or I'll pay you $3,000. I mean, are you going to value that buyer lead the same? Are you going to be willing to pay the buyer lead the same? You know, if you're Zillow Flex, you're going to pay 40% for that buyer lead. You know, that could get tricky. So, I mean, I don't know. A lot of people are saying, oh, we're just going to get buyer rep agreements signed. And I think that might be where it's heading. But there is one major hurdle that no one is considering with that. If you are a buyer's agent and you meet with a buyer and they sign a buyer rep agreement with you, then they are agreeing to pay you a certain amount if you can't get it out of the seller. Okay, whether it be 2.5%, 2%, 3%, $5,000, whatever that fee is negotiated. Here's where it gets interesting. That purchase agreement between a seller and a buyer has nothing to do with your buyer representation agreement between you and your buyer. So the buyer's agent agreement, the buyer agency agreement between a buyer's agent and their buyer has nothing to do with a purchase agreement between a seller and a buyer. And so what's going to happen, those commission amounts are going to have to be written into the contract or tied to the contract. Because if not, what could very easily happen is a buyer saying, I didn't realize that the seller wasn't going to pay you. I don't want to pay you this much money. And a title company and a lender and a buyer and a seller could very likely close a deal, and that buyer telling that buyer's agent, sorry, I'm not paying you. And so now as a buyer's agent, are you going to go to your broker and say, you need to sue this person? I mean, as an owner of a brokerage, I don't want to be that guy suing my clients. So the only way we're going to be able to make sure that a buyer's agent gets paid by their buyer is to put that in the contract. It has to be a part of the contract and fulfilled in order for that deal to close. So buyer rep agreements as they are, I don't think are the answer, me personally, in my opinion, unless you are tying that buyer rep agreement to the contract, unless there's a checkbox in that contract saying buyer rep agreement is attached and part of this contract and has to be fulfilled in order to close. No different than a wood destroying insect report or repairs or anything else. This is a part of the contract that has to be fulfilled in order for a closing to take place. That's what's got to happen. And if that doesn't happen, those buyer rep agreements, I don't think are a solution unless you want to make a living out of suing your clients. And I don't. It's about the furthest thing from my mind. So, I mean, when I woke up this morning and everybody's texting me this, I'm not shocked to see NAR settled. But I am shocked when they came out and said, oh, and by the way, we're no longer going to ask for a commission to be offered to a buyer's agent. You know, all of these lawsuits coming down, those lawsuits are one thing. If you've been paying attention to any of the people that have been watching these things unfold, they will tell you, oh, the lawsuits, yeah, that's a problem. But a decoupling of commissions where clear cooperation is gone and buyers agents are left to fend for themselves, that is the problem. That is what's going to completely upend the industry and change the industry. It's very likely that it's going to lead to a lot more dual agency, which I don't think is a good thing. But I also think buyers being steered to properties that pay the buyer's agent more money is also not a good thing. And I think that it's one of those things, if you look back at like 2008, before I got into the industry, but 2008, before 2008 with a financial crisis for the housing, anybody could get a loan. You know, you're alive, you have a pulse, you got a loan. Anybody can get a loan. But then it basically brought the whole world to its knees. The Great Recession of 2008. And then guess what happened? It swung dramatically to the other side, where, you know, now you can't get a loan. You know, it swung dramatically the other way. And so guess what? As an industry, I won't say we, because I haven't been fighting. I've been saying that we need changes personally, but the industry has been fighting these changes for forever. And so guess what? Now the pendulum is swinging dramatically the other way. And if you aren't paying attention, that pendulum is going to smack you right in the face. So my advice, if you're watching this, if you are somebody relying on buyers, go look at the past year, 2 years, 3 years of your business. If you are relying on buyers to pay your bills, you need to figure something out. You need to go to your broker. You need to go to people you trust. You need to go to the title attorney closing all your buyer deals. And you need to say, what the hell do I need to do? Because coming July 2024, you're no longer going to see clear cooperation. That is what NAR suggested. By July of 2024, so 4 months from now, there's no longer going to be a compensation for buyer's agents in the MLS. And that's what NAR suggested in their agreement to settle. That is extremely challenging for a buyer's agent. And you better be paying attention and you better get ahead of it. Welcome any comments below. Once again, disclaimer, I'm not an attorney. I'm not negotiating any of these things. But I am somebody who's an outsider to the industry, and this is what I see. So this is Grant, 1% List. Have a great day.